Hi, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Matt Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. "2020 is relentless. This week's absolute catastrophe is going down in Hotlanta. What happened is a normal, friendly police interaction when an officer was called to investigate a drunk driver that was passed out in a Wendy's drive-thru, resulted in the death of Rayshard Brooks this week. Despite what the internet provocateurs are telling you, there's nothing that's clear-cut about this case. And more importantly, it doesn't look like there are any bad actors. When I say that, I'm referring to a person that was purposefully trying to do the wrong thing on the police side, like there was with Derek Chauvin in the George Floyd case. So what happened in Atlanta, and what are the big questions? First, to start off, Mr. Brooks was passed out in a Wendy's drive-thru lane. A lot of people don't realize this, and they were asking, why were the police called because a black guy was passed out in his car? If he had been parked, I doubt very much that anybody would have called the police. The problem was, he literally was passed out in the drive-thru lane and cars were having to go around him. So when the first officer, Derek Brosnan, showed up, the interaction was very cordial. Officer Brosnan was friendly and respectful, even though it was very obvious that Brooks was drunk. Brosnan then went back to his own vehicle to call it in, and by the time he got back, Brooks was asleep again. So that gives you an idea of his state of mind and the level of inebriation he was at. Then Officer Garrett Rolfe, the man who would eventually pull the trigger, arrived at the scene. At this point, Rolfe starts asking his own questions, seeking clarification. You can tell that Brooks is still drunk, his words are jumbled, he's having a hard time putting together thoughts, and at one point he even refers to pulling Brosnan over as if he was the police officer. When Rolfe corrects him, Brooks then apologizes and says he can just walk home. Rolfe lets him know that unfortunately that's not the way that they work, and he has to give him a series of field sobriety tests, including a breathalyzer. Brooks then failed the test. Rolfe told him he was too drunk to be let go and he would have to be arrested. Rolfe then moves to handcuff him. And that's when Brooks makes a break for it. It could have been because he was drunk. It could have been because he was worried about going back to prison because he was on parole and there was a good chance that that would result in more jail time. We have no idea why he decided in that moment to start fighting the police, but he did. What is clear, however, is that the rapid switch from being incredibly cordial and friendly to being violent took both officers completely unaware. Brooks is then briefly wrestled to the ground where both officers are screaming for him to stop fighting. Officer Brosnan then pulls out his taser and says, "Please stop fighting or I will tase you. Stop fighting or I will tase you." Brooks then turns towards him and gets control of his taser, then dumps him over his shoulder where Brosnan lands on his head as Rolfe tries to jump on top of both of them to control the situation, resulting in Brosnan getting a concussion. From that moment on, you can see that Brosnan is much slower and he's essentially out of the fight. Brosnan screams that he has his taser. Rolfe then pulls his own and attempts to tase Brooks as Brooks takes flight. As Rolfe pursues Brooks and attempts to chase him down, Brooks turns over his shoulder and fires the taser at Rolfe. In that moment, Rolfe drops his own taser, pulls his service weapon, and fires 3 rounds, striking twice. And then we have some gray area. A lot of people have said that after that, Rolfe ran up and kicked Brooks. But from the only angle that I've seen, it kind of looks like he was checking to see if the taser was still on him or if there were any weapons still around him. I don't know for sure. Maybe he kicked him. If he did, that wasn't appropriate. So what do I think? We always start with a little editorial, and that's all this is, my opinion. I think this is an unfortunate situation all around. I don't think Rolfe wanted to shoot this guy. I don't think Brooks wanted to run. I think Brooks made a bad call to get drunk and then get in a car, which led to a bad call of running away from the police, which led to a bad call of getting into a fight with the police, which led to a bad call of trying to shoot the police with a taser. I think both cops made a bad call of letting their guard down because they thought Brooks was complying. That bad call led to them losing control of the situation, which ultimately led to Brooks's death. I think once the fight happened, adrenaline for all parties spiked through the roof, and everyone there thought they were in a fight for their very lives. Once Brooks got a hold of the taser, that took it to another level. But the big question that I've been asked already tons of times is, would I have fired? I would like to think no. I would like to think that once I saw the taser miss, I would have assessed the situation, that my life was no longer in danger, and that I didn't have to shoot. But I also know how hard it is to make a good decision when adrenaline is spiking and your heart is racing and you're in a fight. Rolf didn't know where Brosnan was. Was he still in this fight to back him up? If the taser does hit him, does Brooks then grab Rolf's gun and kill him or kill his partner? Did Rolf even realize that it was a taser and not a gun? He doesn't know this guy. He hasn't searched him yet. He doesn't know what he has on him. No matter what we all think, watching something from the comfort of our homes, the question that is going to be asked of the jury is, did the officer have a reasonable reason to think that a deadly weapon was pointed at him? That's going to be for a jury to decide. So that situation is bad enough, is already complex and challenging to deal with. Well, now we're going to add a DA that is clearly politically charged to the equation. District Attorney Paul Howard, who is currently losing an election bid by 8 points, needs to do something to save his ass. And what he seems to have chosen to do is to forego the normal procedure of letting the Georgia Bureau of Investigation complete their investigation and make a recommendation of charges, if any. He's decided to level his own charges, and they're extremely aggressive. He's dropped 11 charges, including murder against Rolf, and 3 charges, including aggravated assault against Brosnan. I mean, shit. I've watched the full video a dozen times, and the only crime that Brosnan has committed is not having upper body strength and not being able to grapple. He seems like a really nice guy that was trying to do the right thing and was taken by surprise. I'm not clear on what exactly we want to send Brosnan to prison for. And then we have Rolf. Like I said before, I wish he had made a different call. I hope I would have made a different call. But charging him with straight murder? It's a bridge too far. By charging him with murder, and felony murder at that, which is a much higher charge than any legal expert expected, you're setting yourself up for massive failure. Howard has bought himself some short-term notoriety, but in all likelihood, these charges will not stick. Rolf will get off, and then Atlanta's gonna riot. I just don't see a jury finding this guy guilty of murder. Now, I need to be very clear. Just because a suspect is acting like an asshole, that doesn't mean the police get to kill him. I get that. Part of the job is dealing with people when they're acting like assholes. And Brooks absolutely was acting like an asshole. At every single opportunity to de-escalate, Brooks opted to escalate. He fought the police. He fought for a taser. He threw a cop on his head. And then, in his final bad decision, he pointed a weapon at a police officer. Whether it was a gun or a taser, that is generally a bad policy. And when you look at the speed of everything that happened, I think that the defense is going to be able to say, was that a gun, was that a taser? And the jury's not going to definitively be able to say with 100% certainty that he knew that that was a taser. It just happened too fast. And I think Rolf is going to get off as a result. And again, with Brosnan, if that guy spends a day in jail, I really think it's a miscarriage of justice. I don't see that he did anything wrong. I do recommend a squat rack, some bench press, and maybe a little grappling. Just a little bit. Now, I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but this just isn't the same situation as George Floyd. George Floyd was murdered. It was unjust. It was evil. It was heartless. The Brooks situation is just unfortunate all the way around. A man lost his life. A family lost their dad. What seemed like 2 decent human beings and these 2 officers are now up on charges. One of them has certainly lost his career and could spend his entire life in prison, or in the worst case, even face the death penalty. I have empathy for everyone involved, and I really wish it didn't go down like this. But this is not the George Floyd situation. This was not a racially motivated crime. This situation was born from a lack of preparedness on the part of the officers and a series of extremely bad decisions on the part of Brooks. So if you're going to hit these cops with anything, hit them with a lack of preparedness. But unlike the George Floyd situation, where no amount of training was going to make Derek Chauvin a better person, training would have made a huge difference in this situation. The officers should have been ready. The officers should have been able to control him once he was on the ground. The officers should have prioritized protecting their weapons above all else. The officers should have been able to keep him from getting to his feet and running away. And I hate to say this. Do you know why? Because every single time a video like this pops up, all of the sports jiu-jitsu guys chime in and say, he should have been training jiu-jitsu. And then they go on to talk about how they would have handled it. Now look, all you old school jiu-jitsu guys that practice with strikes and weapons and all the crazy stuff, I believe you when you say that. But you sports jiu-jitsu guys that start off a roll by rolling on your back and showing your butt and pushing it at people, or you're rolling and then you get touched with an elbow like this across your face and all of a sudden you're holding your face like a European soccer player that's trying to find a penalty, or maybe somebody gives you the old fist choke in the neck and you act like you've just literally been murdered. I do not believe you when you say that you would have handled the situation better. I've rolled with you guys. You absolutely would not have done better in a fight. So stop pretending that sports jiu-jitsu on a mat with a trusted partner is the same thing as fighting for your life with somebody you don't know. I know that was rantception, but it had to be said. Anyway, back to Atlanta. We cannot always bucket everything into nice, digestible pieces. Sometimes cops are racist. Sometimes cops are victims. Sometimes cops are put in tough situations and make great decisions. Sometimes cops are put in tough situations and make bad decisions. And sometimes everything is just gray. We didn't get a great outcome here. Nobody, especially the cop that pulled that trigger, wanted this outcome. We should really try to remember that. Because while reforming bad police procedures or getting rid of bad cops, or even ripping apart precincts that are truly broken and rebuilding them from the ground up is a noble effort that we can all get behind, I'm not up for just pretending that all cops are bad, evil people that are just out to do terrible things either. Demanding higher standards from the police and villainizing them is not the same thing. If we keep doing that, we're going to get to a point where no good people want to do this job, and we're going to end up in the same situation we're in with politics. As a result of the charges brought against these two officers, many Atlanta police officers called in sick or left duty. Hundreds of 911 calls went unanswered. Surrounding counties offered that they are only going to respond to officer down calls. I don't know if those officers made the right decision. I'd like to think, probably largely because of the way that I look at things from my military background, that I would have either made the choice to report for duty or to quit the job altogether, rather than take a half-hearted departure from the job. But I also understand where they're coming from. It's a hard job, it's a dangerous job, it's not a job where you get paid a lot of money, and increasingly, it's completely thankless. So all I'm saying is that by all means, shit on bad cops. If there's a systemic problem somewhere, let's root it out and fix it. But assigning the title bad cop to everybody that wears the badge, in the long run, is going to hurt you at least as much as it's hurting all the officers you're assigning the title to. Nuance. It's important. Look at all the variables and maybe slow down the spicy takes just a little bit. And now, without further ado, here's this week's Spicy Takes.
Tensions between India and China in a remote area of the Himalayas ratcheted up this week. A clash ignited Monday that resulted in the deaths of 20 Indian troops. This is a landmark incident in the two countries posturing over what we can only describe as an essentially worthless area of land. According to reports as varied as they are, the Indian patrol encountered a very large Chinese patrol in the middle of the night. The conditions of both countries' standoff together forbid the carrying of firearms, so both patrols were armed with clubs and rocks. A brawl ensued which led to the 20 Indian soldiers' deaths, but China hasn't released any casualty reports thus far. So now the very real talks of war have begun. China has apparently been encroaching on this territory for the past decade, encroaching some 23 miles past where their actual boundary is. Some have equated it to the same moves that China has done to establish bases in the South China Sea over the years. Naturally, China has blamed India for the incident and has taken zero responsibility, which is standard for them. The growing response in India is that a heavy response is needed. That being said, everyone pretty much universally agrees that India will get its ass handed to it by China if they enter into a war.
Another week, another CHAZ story. This week, John McDermott fought off looters with his son that were trying to steal money from his shop and burn all of his cars. John's son, Mason, managed to tackle one of the looters for the police to arrest. He drew his gun on the man after the man tried to cut him with a box cutter. Other looters then swarmed the business and threatened the McDermotts to let their criminal friend go. Mason called Seattle PD for help 19 times. They finally picked up the phone to tell the McDermotts that help was not coming. Eventually, the McDermotts had the choice between shooting the looter or letting him go to avoid the mob. They let him go. Both expressed their absolute disbelief that when their lives were on the line, the police refused to show. Seattle PD's official response is that they were monitoring from a distance. Folks, Second Amendment is a good thing right now.
In surprise it took this long news, Quaker Oats announced Wednesday that the Aunt Jemima pancake mix and syrup brand will be getting an image rebrand. People on social media called out the brand for continuing to use the image and discussed its racial history. The Aunt Jemima image has actually gone through a number of visual changes over the past decades, but given the current social climate and fearing public outcry, Quaker Oats decided to change it completely. They have not yet announced what it's going to be. Following suit, the rice brand Uncle Ben's is also getting a revamp. We also don't know to what.
It seems like only a few months ago that North Korea and South Korea were shaking hands on the DMZ. Those days are long gone. North Korea has come full circle. At the head of this new charge is Kim Jong-un's evil sister, Kim Yo-jong. She first earned international attention at the 2018 Olympic Games when the press was all over her because she's kind of cute. The games are largely remembered for North Korea's all-is-well propaganda offensive. So lately, Yo-jong has been all over state TV, bad-mouthing all of the officials from South Korea. She's getting extremely spicy. On Tuesday, North Korea blew up the Inter-Korea Liaison Office in the city of Kaesong. That's right, blew it up. Talk about literally vaporizing the peace process. Shortly after that, they promised they were immediately returning to all military drills. Most political analysts believe this is just to shore up support for the family leadership should Kim Jong-un die. So if anybody can keep this whack-ass legacy alive, we think it's her.
After years of laying pipe to save his species, Diego, a libidinous giant tortoise, is finally retiring to a private island to live out the rest of his days. Diego, who is over 100 years old, is credited with saving his species by fathering 800 babies. Previously, Diego was moved from San Diego to a remote island in the Galapagos with just him and one other male and 12 females. During his time on the island, Diego helped boost the population to 2,000 giant tortoises. So reports say that while Diego enjoyed his time as a young centurion, he's currently learning the hardships of living on a tiny island with his 12 girlfriends.
The massive civil unrest across the country, coupled with months of quarantine, have everybody not giving a shit about the coronavirus. Here's the problem. Coronavirus don't care. Epidemiologists across the country are super worried that everyone just said, I'm done with this, and that it's going to create a massive danger across the nation, that it's going to result in a shitload of death. And they're probably right. According to data, 10 states hit record highs for the virus this week. Alabama, Arkansas, California, Florida, Nevada, North Carolina, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Texas. While nobody's trying to shutter people away anymore, they're still trying to remind everyone. Try to keep social distancing. Wear a mask. Wash your hands. Don't gather in large groups. If you want to protest, check out the badass way that people from Hong Kong treated the Tiananmen Square protest.
Boston Dynamics got one step closer to iRobot and Skynet this week. The creepy robot dog that you see in all the videos, affectionately called Spot, is now on sale for a mere $75,000. The creators are pitching the sale of Spot for industries like warehouses, power plants, and construction sites. I can picture it now, the foreman's on a construction site. Yeah, we're gonna need some bolstering over here. What the f***? It can be used for a variety of tasks and can be outfitted with cameras and even a mechanical arm. However, if you're looking for a house pet, this probably isn't it. Spot still hasn't figured out how to navigate people, so it'll definitely end up under your feet. Or trampling you because it's huge. On the plus side, it does have an intruder alarm that sounds a lot like a 50 cal. So there are pros to these cons. Spot has even been used to screen COVID patients, utilizing its limited medical research. With cameras for eyes, this allows Spot to enter places humans can't, like unsafe workplaces such as nuclear power plants or minefields. For you landmine workers. Is there a downside, you ask? Well, it only comes with 2 batteries and a 1-year warranty. We're also still waiting to hear whether or not there's a robot vet. And all we need now is it getting fitted with some sweet AI so we can add it to our 2020 Apocalypse Bingo.
Who's ready for this week's 2020 bingo? If you had Indian alcoholic monkey rampage, fill in a square. An alcoholic monkey named Kahlua went on a rampage, resulting in 1 death and 250 injuries, mostly women and children. Recently, the monkey's owner, who had only fed Kahlua alcohol and meat for his entire life, passed away. Like any self-respecting alcoholic primate, Kahlua took it upon himself to break out and go on a rage-fueled rampage throughout the city. Eventually, he was captured by authorities and brought to the zoo. There they found he cannot cohabitate with other monkeys and he hates vegetables. He has been sentenced to monkey solitary confinement in a zoo. Kahlua is just one in a slew of monkey problems reported in India recently. Other monkey charges include kidnapping, theft, arson, and surprisingly, racketeering.
The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, is going through the growing pains of any self-proclaimed autonomous zone in the United States. On the lighter side of things, it's decided to change its name from CHAZ to CHOP, which was all well and good except they couldn't originally decide what the O should stand for. They have since decided on Capitol Hill Organized Protest. With that taken care of, the whole place is running on sort of a reverse social hierarchy, as they call it. Essentially, anyone who isn't white has the highest authority. It's not all unified, though, as various factions have vied for control of policing and enforcement of, well, they're not laws, so let's just call them values. And if you don't agree with their values, they'll strong-arm you and put you into one of their safe spaces, or as the rest of the world calls them, interrogation tents. Of the variety of groups that have formed, some are dedicated to peace, while others just want to throw a cool block party and have live music. During all this, a self-proclaimed warlord named Raz has emerged. Like any good warlord, Raz is a burgeoning SoundCloud rapper. It's a faction free-for-all in CHAZ, as it's been reported that conservative journalists have been barred or forced out of the CHAZ, and even a Christian street preacher was choked unconscious and dragged from the premises. It's ironic and laughable that the degree of their violence directly conflicts with the free speech that the autonomous zone is supposed to stand for. Domino's Pizza is apparently their main source of food, as their gardens need time to flourish with squash and flowers. Nothing says we're bucking the establishment quite like mass ordering of Domino's Pizza. So stay tuned for more on the CHAZ and CHOP. It can only get more entertaining. In more 2020 news that nobody asked for, scientists are about to release untested genetically modified mosquitoes in Florida and Texas. The new mosquitoes contain a protein which in theory would kill off old organic mosquitoes. This will give way to a new species of mosquito that is less likely to bite humans and pass on contracted viruses. The Environmental Protection Agency approved the release, citing that males are being released who don't bite humans. They are now being sued by every conservationist group because they apparently did zero research and just went with the what could go wrong approach. So people are out in force calling for opposition for this Jurassic Park bullshit. Humans and mosquitoes both agreed that 2020 sucks.
And finally, in Florida man news, a man who went on a machete rampage was arrested when witnesses identified him from a machete tattoo on his face. That's it. That's the whole story. What else do you want? And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Matt Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and I've got a question for you. If I were to start a podcast, what would you call it? Also, don't forget you can always go to rangerup.com and use code BNN for 25% off your order. Have a great weekend.